Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie's slow motion start with two women gossiping about the new employee and how one of them thinks the guy is handsome, while the other, jealous, insists her colleague doesn't stand a chance. Besides, the gossip assures that the guy will soon quit. When they talk about the sunglasses he wears, one of the women mentions the rumor that he has an eye disease, but their chat is interrupted when they notice something strange happening between two guys. Soon we discover that these scoundrels are the infamous two guys on a motorcycle. When they rob a young woman, everyone at the security center starts tracking their movements through the cameras and informing the police of the best routes to catch the criminals. The problem is that the agents always get close but never actually manage to catch them. And at one point, the crooks manage to evade the police cars. However, Zhang doesn't lose sight of the thieves. On the contrary, he seems to see the criminals in slow motion and quickly pinpoints each of their movements. This impresses Bayan and everyone in the office. After all, the police manage to corner the robbers quickly. But while everyone celebrates, Zhang reflects that he isn't super skilled or someone with superpowers, but rather a man with a medical condition. In the past, we see that during a school competition, the boy almost won alongside Bong Sumi. The problem is that in the final stretch, the boy started seeing the world around him in slow motion, causing him to crash to the ground. Later, he went to the ophthalmologist, who waved his hands to try to confuse Zhang's vision. Even so, the kid managed to guess the number of fingers. Not to mention that all the doctor's tests were easy for the teenager, and the results led the doctor to conclude that the boy could see the movement of objects very clearly. To prove his point, he threw a baseball at Jung, who focused so much that he saw it approaching in slow motion. With that, the teenager caught the ball with no problem. This ends up being proof that Yang was born with a condition that allows him to see movements in slow motion. Another way to change your perception of time is by using some substance that Proer definitely hates. And he can see this way whenever he concentrates, which makes the doctor suggest the boy would be a great baseball player. However, since the poor kid fell while running, the ophthalmologist concludes that this ability gives him vertigo, as his eyes focus so much that they confuse his own brain. In other words, sports aren't the best option for Yang, since he can't run. And since his eyes are very sensitive, the teenager is also forced to wear sunglasses. As time passed, his father had to work away to earn money for his treatment. As the days went by, Yang realized that this condition gave him some advantages, so much so that the boy could draw everything he saw in detail. The problem is that he became known for having strange eyes, which made him suffer bullying. But Bong was the only one who never mistreated Zhang, and this friendship lasted for quite some time. The problem is that the girl started getting teased for hanging out with the kid, so she also distanced herself, and the boy couldn't even run after her because of his vertigo. After this disappointment, Zhang decided to watch TV up close, just to damage his eyes. The problem is that he developed a taste for dramas. Then, romance stories became a pastime, and he was inspired by the leading men in those stories. Years passed, and Zhang stayed in his room without much contact with the outside world. But when his father passed away, the only male figure the young man had was his ophthalmologist. Back to the present, the young man notices that people's lives are just like dramas, since everyone is the protagonist of their own story. And he notices that only lonely people are out on the streets at night. He thinks he could be friends with a guy who's practicing pitching. On the other hand, we see Bong talking to the head of security about the newcomer, who, even though he's very quiet, will be trained by the experienced guard as his successor. When the two return to the office, they find Zhang pretending to catch the pitches of the lonely guy. The oddball pretends to throw a ball at them, and later the young man is drawing images of the streets and making a count. Seeing this, Byung even tries to engage with the guy about their work. The problem is that the guy pays no attention to his superior. The next day, Zhang keeps doing the same thing, and his colleague keeps trying to understand the newcomer's drawings, who, trying to make a good impression, asks what place Bong likes to go to. Then, when the veteran answers that it's the store frequented by his mother, Jangra, his drawings. This way, we see that he drew the places his mother and sister go to. However, Bayon asks if the newcomer is dating anyone, and even though Zhang thinks that's something out of a drama, there is still someone he likes. Next, we see him looking at a specific camera, to the point that he goes personally to the place to meet Bong again. At first, the girl doesn't recognize her old friend, and then she is confronted by her loan shark. Then, the oddball listens closely to their argument, only to be distracted by the guy and by the bomb itself. As if that weren't enough, Yang spends his days watching every step the girl takes, since now he's determined to reconnect with her. First, the watchman picks up a sofa in the middle of the street to drag it somewhere, and on the way, he sees the boy who passes by every day. The thing is, Zhang reflects on the boy being the first person in the city to wake up, and instead of trying to interact normally, the oddball just stares at the kid's face. Besides him, The guy also discovers that the dude who plays baseball at night is actually a bus driver, so Jang tries to gesture a pitch to make contact, only to get scolded by the guy. After that, we see that the watchman left the sofa in front of the cafe that Bong goes to, just so she'd have somewhere to sit at night. The next day, we see that the girl is good with numbers because her coworkers praise this skill. Later, the redhead goes to do an audition in a theater. The problem is, her acting doesn't convince the judges. Meanwhile, Yang keeps watching the girl. Then he has the idea to ask Byung for help. A fun fact is that the main character calls his colleague a sai. This is a way Koreans refer to men who are considerably older, but not old enough to be seen as elderly. It's pretty much the same as calling someone uncle in Brazil. Back to the story, the veteran ignores the newcomer's call, but the young guy is clever and calls him by his name. That way, the two ride their bikes in the rain, and Bonga advises Jung to give Bong an umbrella so she can stay dry. Arriving at her street, the watchman offers her cover from the rain. The problem is, the redhead ends up thinking the poor guy is a pervert. To make things worse, Jung's communication and flirting skills are terrible. So, obviously, Bong becomes even more suspicious of him. After being rejected, the duo reflects on how the girl really is a tough person. Then, the watchman gets the idea to look for more specialized help. The next day, we see the two at Jung's ophthalmologist's office. The advice the messy-haired doctor gives is to offer flowers to the girl. At first, it seems like an outdated tactic, but Bong recognizes the strategy might work, and the guy admits his doctor knows his stuff. Later, Jang's mother is cutting his hair because she knows the style girls like. The next morning, Bong is late for an appointment, so we see the judges in the theater, and one of them answers her call. At that moment, the guy says auditions are over, but by insisting, the girl gets a chance to sing over the phone. So, the crazy girl stops in the middle of the street to show her talent. She sings so well that two men carrying a painting stop just to listen, and the judge runs to show his colleague. Yang arrives just in time and realizes his beloved really sings very well. After the song ends, the light turns green, and before Bong gets run over, the watchman quickly saves her from the crosswalk. Now Jung gives the girl flowers and tries to flirt with her. But, unlucky for him, the redhead is in a bad mood, because she wanted a box of spaghetti instead of flowers. To make it worse, the girl thought his haircut and glasses were really tacky. Then, after being insulted, the poor guy decides to reveal that he's her childhood friend. But the redhead doesn't care because her name isn't Bong Sumi, it's Sumu. On the way home, his mother and sister argue about his horrible haircut. As days go by, Jang starts comparing Sumir with photos of his childhood friend. Not to mention, after this disappointment, the poor guy can barely get out of bed to work. But after recovering, Yang decides to retrace the streets he drew while working. And one time, he passes by the shy girl and doesn't pay attention. Then, the naughty girl tries to act tired from carrying bags, but since the watchman doesn't care, she calls his attention saying, "A man shouldn't let a pretty woman carry heavy things." So the fool carries her groceries, and before leaving, the two talk about Bong. The guy laments the confusion, but Sumi says she wants to hear more about this girl's story. Back at work, the first thing Jang does is tell B he plans to quit. And before the veteran can say anything, the watchman gets distracted by Asamir celebrating. That way, she becomes the inspiration for the guy to start drawing again. And when his colleague tries to convince him to stay, Jang agrees without thinking twice. Next, Bong complains about being called Ajusi because he doesn't think he's old enough to be treated that way. At night, we see Sumi celebrating her achievement in Umbra. The girl is on the phone with her mother, and when she sees Jang, there she decides to talk to him. So, the first thing the guy does is follow the redhead's wish to get a box of pasta instead of flowers, and when they sit down, he admits it and asks for help to rehearse his dialogue. The funny thing is that her line is shorter than this sentence I'm saying. Then the young woman asks if her friend has any talent. From that moment on, Sumi starts throwing spoons to test Jang's slow-motion reflexes. Meanwhile, everyone at the bar starts getting scared because the guy manages to catch the cutlery and say the number written on them. This is so impressive that the girl even takes a spoon as a souvenir. When they leave, the guard carries Sleeping Beauty on his back, and besides smelling her floral perfume, the weirdo feels like a big man for carrying her on his back. The next day, Jang notices that Sumi always disappears when passing through streets without cameras. For this reason, he decides to follow the paths made by the redhead. And who takes advantage of this loophole is Bong, because he snoops through the rookie's drawings. When night falls, the redhead finds the guard waiting in the middle of the way. So, the two walk together, and Jang replies that he works at the city's camera control center. Upon discovering this, the woman wonders if it's enough for him, because both are already in their 30s, but the young man assures her that he likes it. And upon learning Jang's profession, the redhead realizes there's a person behind the city's cameras. Since they walked a lot, the two sit on the sofa, and Sumi reveals she feels butterflies in her stomach every day. Continuing with the story, the girl is happy that her friend dragged a sofa just because she felt pain in the middle of the way. The problem starts when the poor guy thinks Sumi likes him, because in reality, the one who gives her butterflies is the owner of the cafe. She says the guy probably has a car. Besides, the woman comments that she wanted to celebrate her achievement with this guy. As if this confession wasn't enough, the guard replies that he doesn't have a car, and knowing this leaves the redhead a bit disappointed. After throwing cold water on her friend, Asumi decides to leave because she's embarrassed to be seen by the cafe owner. To make matters worse, the waitress shows the guard to her boss, and the man offers coffee in the greatest goodwill. It turns out Yang is blunt with the poor guy, and then drags the sofa away. Byong watches this situation and finds his colleague's attitude strange. The next morning, the young man is furious to learn that his beloved likes another guy. The weirdo keeps saying he won't take Sumi out when he gets a car. Then, when the girl does something cute for the camera, the fool falls in love again. So Yang asks several people if they have a car to impress the redhead, and no one he knows owns a car. Meanwhile, the woman decides to quit her job and the actress seems happy with this decision. The unlucky part is that AJ, with Baesola's hairstyle, shows up to collect the debt. Thus, the jerk pressures Asumi. After all, she needs a job to pay what she owes. However, the redhead doesn't care and is quite rude to the guy. Her sharp replies enrage him, because if the debtor doesn't pay him nicely, an even worse collector will show up. Her rudeness pushes AJ to the limit, and before he hits her, Jang and Bong appear on a motorcycle. Thus, the guard manages to save his beloved from this mess. The only bad thing is that Baesola doesn't like him. Later, the girl activates the security center's voice call and thanks her friend for the help. Some time passes and the two meet in a park, where there's a legend that a person will fulfill their dreams if they don't let a leaf fall. Knowing this makes Jang pick dozens of leaves for Sumi. On the way back, the young man wants to know where his friend would go if she had a car. The girl's answer is the sea, since she had to live in the countryside after losing her father as a child. And luckily for both, they arrive at the city's beach. Stepping on the sand, the redhead lets the leaves fly and they say goodbye at the end of the outing. Later, we find out that Yang made drawings of the areas without cameras, precisely to know the path taken by Sui. Then, the guard notes that he wants to take his beloved out, and the obstacle is that no one he knows has a car. Next, the colleagues pretend to play baseball on the big screen, and that's no coincidence. The next morning, Junk starts traveling on the pitcher's bus, which allows the guy to reflect on people's busy routines and how they should enjoy life more. At night, the young man is practicing baseball with the driver, and the guy makes it clear that he doesn't want to meet Mara, but the guard insists that his acquaintance wants to go there. Next, the gossipers talk about Baduk, which is the Korean name for the board game, known as Go in Japan and Weiki in China. It's basically a board where players place stones on the points where the lines cross. According to this rule, one player captures the other's pieces until one surrounds the other. Continuing, Bong interrupts the conversation to invite one of the gossipers to a family gathering, and at first, the woman finds it strange. Meanwhile, Sumi asks a friend for advice about Jung's story, a guy who reunited with his childhood friend whom he was in love with. The dilemma is that the girl these days is as slick as soap, and the boy is scatterbrained. The response from her friends is bad because it seems like a very dysfunctional relationship. The next morning, Bon and Jung take the same bus as always, and the redhead gets on without even noticing. Then, as soon as they drop off another CLT, Sumi falls asleep and wakes up to see a completely different route. She was supposed to be going to work, but Bong and Jung reveal that the next destination is the beach. Besides, the girl doesn't need to worry about her job because the veteran had the Gossip Girl cover for Sumi. Arriving at the toll booth, the group is stopped by a highway officer since the bus shouldn't be leaving its city of origin. And when they see they're being blocked, the group tries to talk to the guard until Suma realizes the conversation isn't working and decides to start an argument with the police officer. Next, everyone else tries to calm the situation except for Zhang, who reflects on having met many people and how he'd like to look at them. At the end of the argument, the group is forced to return to their city, and Bong notices that the boy's father sleeps more than usual. But even though this is worrying, the boy threatens to beat up the veteran if he keeps bringing it up. On the way back home, Junk confesses that he admires and even envies the happiness Sumi feels when she sings. Returning to the city, the watchman walks with the cart boy through the streets, and the reason his father sleeps so much is a sleep disorder. They stop walking and sit down to talk, so Jang asks the boy to greet him first when they see each other on the street. Back at work, the young man hears about a serial kidnapper case roaming the city, and the scoundrels usually act specifically on streets without cameras. Knowing this ends up being desperate for Yang, because he counts the steps Sumi should take to reappear on the cameras. Keeping this in mind, the poor guy thinks his beloved has been kidnapped, and to try to help, the watchman runs out of work. The dizziness caused by his illness practically prevents him from standing. However, the guy refuses to stay still and manages to reach the street where Sumi was. Then, out of nowhere, she reappears and scares him, and Jang gets angry at the redhead's prank. It turns out this is proof that the guy watches his beloved all day, and even trying to hide it, the girl knows the truth. Next, Sumi puts a scarf on him and asks if he feels something for her. Then Jang gathers courage and confirms he likes her. At that, the girl decides to take off his glasses to hear the confession looking into his eyes. As soon as the couple gets together, we discover the watchman made a map with all the routes his girlfriend takes during the day. As time passes, the lovebirds become more and more united, and Yang reflects on wishing he could look at her longer. At night, Sumi invites the watchman for tea, and since the idiot Bonga thinks he's included, the oddball quickly makes his veteran leave because, if all goes well, this tea isn't what Aju is thinking. So now that he's got Jong in front of the goal, he just needs to let the guy score. While the friends argue, the redhead discovers that loan sharks broke into her house to collect payment. The scoundrels start turning everything upside down mercilessly, and there's nothing Asumi can do. Not even Yang can help, because his vision suddenly became blurry and his dizziness returned even stronger. Later, the girl thinks she much preferred her life in the past than now, and she's ashamed of what she's become. This feeling made her lie about her identity, and Sumir is actually Bonga, Jong's childhood friend. In fact, the woman still keeps the drawings the boy gave her years ago. After they finish talking, each goes their own way, and back at the ophthalmologist, the watchman finds out he must stop running and straining his eyes urgently. Bong is also struggling, since her debt ended up forcing her to sell her own house and leave her job. As hours pass, the camera center keeps operating and the gossip girl notices a specific, very suspicious car. Analyzing it, the woman notes it has the same license plate as the kidnapper's vehicle. The possibility that the culprits are acting makes everyone at the base alert, including the commander. The bad luck is that the bastards end up leaving the camera's field of vision, and the chance they'll pass through the same street where Sumida is makes Jong decide to act alone again. With this in mind, the watchman rides his bike to try to get there in time and soon falls. In the middle of the investigation, Bong calls the bus driver, and the guy deviates from his route. Looking at the footage, the veteran sees his colleague barely getting up, and when questioned by the commander, the man reveals Jang can't see very well and goes to help the rookie. During this confusion, the redhead is copying the way her boyfriend walks through the streets, and when she looks ahead, she comes face to face with the kidnapper. The thug subdues the girl, and Jiang uses all his strength to get up. Walking through the streets, he sees and shouts for Swear. At that, the redhead runs towards him. The twist makes the kidnapper run away, and before being run over, the watchman is saved from an accident by the girl. Seeing his condition, the girl remembers that the guy shouldn't be running anymore. However, Yang recalls that necessity allowed him to make this exception, and he notes that the young man didn't even notice he was almost run over. It doesn't take long for the police to arrive and take the woman as a witness. Then Byung arrives. From that moment, Jang wonders if the girl who was in front of him has already left. The veteran praises Jang's attitude. The problem is that the poor guy can't see his friend, as he has just lost his vision completely. We find out that he did everything possible to memorize Sumi's face in his mind. Then his mother is shocked to notice her son's condition. On the way home, the young man assures her that everything is fine. After all, Jang memorized all the textures of the walls and the necessary steps to walk in the streets he considers important. He did this mainly because he considers himself the man of the house in his father's absence. But it doesn't take long for him to despair and feel useless because of his condition. His mother comforts him and makes it clear that Yang is much better than when he used to lock himself in his room watching dramas. However, he still reflects on what he will do from now on. Meanwhile, the bus driver ends up crossing the same streets as the kidnapper. He manages to block the only escape route of the scoundrel, and when he and the boy get off the bus, the idiot pulls out a knife. Seeing the danger, the boy calls his father, who immediately scares the bandit, and the police arrive to finally put the villain behind bars. On another day, we see the ophthalmologist remembering the day he received a portrait made by Jung. Now the young man stays at home thinking about the future and sees his things leaving for good. As the seasons pass, the girl finally reappears on camera, trying to make contact and with a new look. Seeing that it didn't work, the first thing she does is go back to the old sofa. Sitting on it, Sumi sees Jung inside the cafe, and before she can approach her beloved, the young woman is saddened to see his condition. So she starts following the steps he takes, without saying anything. One day, both arrive at his art gallery, and the woman discovers that he has become an artist, putting all his memories on canvas. Most of the paintings and drawings involve Mara, their group of friends, and above all, Sumi herself. The tributes move her, and when she tries to follow him once again, Jang stops pretending and finally talks to his beloved. It turns out he always sensed her floral perfume, and since spring hadn't come yet, Bong was the only one who could have that scent. In the end, Jang and Sumi can finally be together. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more new videos. See you next time.